So I see we have an intimate group today, which is especially a good one for questions that arise or exclamations like, how could this be? This is the day for it. And so we're going to get to the third of the three grands, which are the trio. They're just known like that. Diego Rivera, Carrasco. Well, and then the third one, I'm going to hold off for a minute. And we have a couple of digressions today as well. One of them, this is an answer to a question someone asked at the end last time that I didn't answer very much because I thought, oh, I'm not sure, I better check this. Why these Mexican artists, these two great Mexican artists, Rivera and Orozco, were getting invitations to come create murals in the United States in the 1930s, and especially sponsored in both of these instances by Rockefellers or Rockefeller adjacent people. Part of it is that one of the Rockefeller wives was fascinated by Mexican folk art, and there was a general American fantasy about how life was simpler still in Mexico among the peasants, and that sort of like idealization of what life could have been like. But there was also another undercurrent, which was that the Rockefellers were among those really wealthy Americans who were fearing the Mexican nationalizing of their industries. And Mexico, in the United States, owned a lot of the Mexican oil fields. So this is fairly adroit for them to be sponsoring the art. Because why else? I mean, I think it's a head scratcher that the Rockefellers wanted in Rockefeller Center to have a work of an artist known as being fairly revolutionary and wanting to support the peasants in Mexico, do something at this bastion of proclamation of American capitalist wealth as Rockefeller Center, and to put him in the middle between Picasso and Matisse, who were already at that time considered the two greatest contemporary French artists. And French art was much more esteemed generally than Mexican art was. So how come Rivera? Well, that partly explains it. And I have another reason for showing you this man in control this is a copy that was Rivera painted in Mexico City in a museum there, but of that now completely, I think, taken from the wall, just chipped off the wall. The fresco that he did taken off because however tolerant the Rockefellers were in that wonderful letter that Rockefeller wrote, said, in a private setting, this would be okay. But to have Lenin there among the people that I'm trying to sort of court to rent property from me, not going to work. So, in all of this, I have not said a thing about what mural paintings were in the United States, because we think of, especially for this period, the 20s, 30s, into the 40s, that the titans of it are these three Mexicans. Well, there was a lot of mural painting in the United States in the 30s. And there are many artists whose names are not so familiar who are doing it. But this is one that you could see without taking too long a drive. This is a work by Ben Shahn. And it's down in, well, it's now called Roosevelt. It was a town at the time called Homestead. It's down in the Princeton Heightstown area. And this is a bona fide fresco on the wall of a school. It was a town that was formed as part of the FDR's programs to lift people out of poverty, provide employment, to do social engineering to help pull us out of the Depression. So it was under him that the government founded this new town, and it was a town designed expressly for Jewish workers who lived in the squalid conditions in the Lower East Side, and that they would go to these new hygienic settings. There would be sort of subsistence farming, and they could have their own industries there. And so it was a sort of a utopian idea for a community. I think if you were to just look at this, not know the person, never been there, know nothing more, but you knew something about Rivera, you'd say, oh, that looks a lot like Rivera, because it has that same way of not exactly collaging, but put the scenes one next to another the way Rivera did. Here it is close up. I don't remember the name of the mural overall, but it just records the arrival of the immigrants, and then the settling of this town, and then the industries that are available in the town. So this section, doesn't that look like the way thinking of composition? And then, of course, he's learned all the techniques from Rivera.
What do you think, what are the I mean, I know they're coffins, but what do you think they represent?
I think that's the villains in Germany. Villains in Germany.
Okay. This is during the Holocaust?
It's the late 30s.
Oh.
And look down below. See, this is you'd be looking down into Ellis Island, and the sort of the warehousing, the new people coming in.
Is that Einstein?
Yeah. He lived there for a while.
I thought in the coffins they were Sacco and Vanzetti. No?
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Thank you. Yeah, it is Sacco and Vanzetti.
It's Sacco and Vanzetti.
Who's Vanzetti?
They were two Italian revolutionaries, and they were tried and put to death without adequate evidence by the government. Yeah. And then this, I just showed you for a moment last time, these were by Thomas Hart Benton. They're now in the Met, and even saying that would indicate to you, if you sat there and thought critically for a while, that these must not be frescoes. Well, they're not. They're murals. Murals just means painting on wall. I mean, mural is the word for wall. And they are enormous canvases. But these were the ones that made for the boardroom at that new school for social research. At the same time, Orozco was working there. At the same time, the artist Thomas Hart Benton was teaching at the, I don't remember now which Manhattan art school, and Jackson Pollock was one of his pupils, and Jackson Pollock posed for some of the figures in here. I think it's the Art Students League. And Jackson, Benton also had a commission to do murals all over the Missouri State Capitol. This was the social history of Missouri, and there are other rooms with others. So there was I brought in one more to show you just because I find it particularly quaint and charming. This is by Grant Wood, who you would never think of as doing a mural, but he was in charge for Iowa of the employment of artists, and they're often through these various kinds of commissions. Now, Grant Wood himself did not paint this. This is in Iowa State University in their library, but he supervised students who did study what there should go in there, how to paint it, and doing this. And this again they're on canvases, And when they're on canvases, a frequent way to work is the way older era artists had done when they want to duplicate a work and especially to enlarge it. You take your drawing, your painting, whatever it is, you square it up, then you just increase the size of the squares so that you have a composition that fills the space you want. It's essentially a kind of paint by numbers that you can just follow out where things ought to go. And now we're coming to the third of the three greats, David Alfaro Siqueiros. Am I going to give you a fanfare about this? There's hardly anything to see. He's a very different character than, say, Rivera, who was probably the most social of the three men, most interested in the humanities. And then you had Orozco, who had that sort of philosophical understanding of the world and how there are cycles, a kind of a personal distance from the things he shows. Siqueiros is a radical, revolutionary political figure who throughout his life never differentiated between what he did in painting and what he did in writing and what he did in union organizing. And he was in and out of prison for a great deal of his life. And this is the second work he did in the United States. And I'll come back to it in a little while. This is also by him. And I will somehow get her by the end. Because this is a completely different. It's again in a stairwell. It's in the stairwell of the Union of Electrical Workers in their headquarters in Mexico City. And it's just called the Picture of the Bourgeoisie. Yes, yes. They're made to look like gold coins. So I'll use that to move in with him. And I thought some of you would be familiar with this. This is one of his paintings, which is in the Museum of Modern Art. This is just called The Cry, Scream, from the late 30s. It's political. You just see, yes.
Who's the artist?
Siqueiros, Siqueiros.
He's from where?
Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out to have been all Mexican because in 4 weeks, I've only done the three really major mural painters of the 20th century, and they're all Mexican. Yeah.
What time period is this one?
The late 1930s. So now we'll go back and start from his youth. So here are the three greats. You have Siqueiros on the left, Orozco in the middle, Rivera on the right. Siqueiros is about a decade younger than the other men, but his background in terms of art is the same. He went to the same art school, which was the first art school ever founded in the Western world. I mean, it's a very prestigious school, and you had very traditional academic training. He hadn't been born in Mexico City. He came there. He got completely involved in the Mexican Revolution, which I'll say more about in a moment. But where did he first meet Rivera? Now, remember, Rivera, the Mexican Revolution is 1910 to 1920. Rivera spent that whole time in Europe. So Rivera had no personal firsthand experience of people turning against compatriots and warfare on the streets. and through the countryside. So later, just immediately afterwards, after the end of the revolution, before Rivera came back to Mexico, Siqueiros got a little fellowship from the Mexican government to go to Europe to study painting because he was a very promising student. And here you have Rivera in the center at the back and Siqueiros on the right-hand side. And this is just before the two men who had already been contacted by this Vasconcelos in the government, asking them to come back to paint murals. This was actually a movement initiated by the government rather than the artists, because there was such an awareness that there's a high rate of illiteracy, even in the capital and certainly out in the country, that if you want to reach people, if you want to get any kind of message from the government out to them, pre having your radios, murals are the way to do it. That is, newspapers do no good. So it has to be a visual image. And it has to be a visual image out where everybody can see it. So on public buildings and on exteriors, ultimately, is what they're going to want to do. So the government was encouraging Siqueiros Rivera to make this trip to Italy to study mural painting, frescoes, how they were done technically, and how they fit into the spaces, all the sort of just boning up on them. And then, when he came back, that Rivera, in this one fresco he did for the Ministry of Education, showed Siqueiros on the lower left here, very accurately showing that he is not only important, but that he is militant, and he is willing to take up arms. And in fact, he did fight during the revolution. So here he is as he was a very, very much liked young man. He was an affable guy. It isn't like a grudge in a sense. And this is a lithograph he made of himself some years later, where he's expressing something of inner urges. And this one he did of himself much later, in the 1940s. This myself is a hotshot. Look at the nails. Do you see how weird that is? You can see the clumps of paint on that. This is an artist. This might as well be his motto, although it's not one he applied only to himself. Revolutionary art requires a revolutionary means. And after we get through his early work, he encourages, we're not going to use traditional fresco. We're not going to use traditional paint. We need what is modern. We need what industry is doing. He uses auto paint. He uses plastics. He uses a blowtorch. He uses a spray gun. He does no more painting with a brush on the wall. And that's paint that's been just flung on the canvas, and it is plastic.
Where is it located?
I hope I will have put this down, so let me just check. The National Museum of Modern Art in Mexico City. I don't know. Sometimes in this period when he was experimenting, and we'll come back to this group that he encouraged to experiment, he came to New York for a year. They had a laboratory of experimental art. Pollock was one of his students. They would sometimes just start by flinging paint on a canvas and then would scrape it away and then to begin to create something on it. And so I don't know what part in the process that comes from. So here we are back at the National Preparatory School in Mexico City, this august 17th century, 18th century building that was the best education in the city, where we've looked at this now. 2 weeks is the third time you're going to see this, but maybe I only got this 2 weeks. This one by Orozco and this by Rivera. The earliness of what's going on here is partly because of the politics within the art school at that time, which is still saying, we're going to build something out of European tradition and just going to nationalize it in a way. Then when that man was booted out of his job, then things really change. But while this is the 1922, 1924, this is what Siqueiros paints at that same time. Now it's unfinished. The change initiated by the students, young art students, so displeased the administration that they stopped funding any murals. They said nothing more for Orozco, nothing more for Siqueiros. Only Rivera was able to placate them and do things calm enough so that he continued to get work. But look how different this is from the same time, even if it's unfinished. And it's called Death of a Worker. And it's just in a stairwell. And I'll get you closer to some sections of it. It's what I've got to go all the way back here. It's that same thing. It's like literally in your face, isn't it? It's like, so here's the arm, and there's a review. His early paintings haven't survived, but a review of them is. And one review is about how things seem to come out at you all the time. So this cerulean blue sarcophagus coffin being carried by workers. And why that for a subject? Well, there had been a radical political leader who'd been assassinated shortly before. And so thought that perhaps that's what's a reference to. But that's perfectly convincing perspective of a great degree of sophistication that you don't see in the faces, right? Because those faces, well, here, let's see. Just look for a minute. They are to represent peasantry, and they are to represent something pre-European art. So he's going for inspiration there. I mean, this perspective is a totally Western thing. And the reason I brought in the black and white is that you can also see what he's put on the lid of the coffin. There's a hammer and a sickle. Now, it's not the Soviet flag. They're separate from one another. But he's also declaring his own allegiance. When there was the kind of uproar in the art school, the students refused to continue in the traditional educational system that they were, the way to paint that they were being taught. Siqueiros, who was in his mid-teens, was one of the leaders. I mean, he is the man who from the beginning was like, things have to change. So he's very knowingly doing something that sets him apart and is an affront to anyone of traditional training. See, that's like an Olmec head that has that same kind of like coarseness and emphasis on the mouth. Olmec is considered the earliest Mexican culture that survives, whose art is known. And for me, I'm always like, oh my goodness. Even though it has that simplification and that harking back to there's still a person there. He manages to combine a living human being of a specific appearance with those layers of agenda. And he did some others on ceilings, and there are very few images available. This one, I'm just hoping you can see. If you look at the figures at the bottom. They're recumbent figures, only to half length. The heads are to the outside, with their mouths wide open. Are they the dead? Well, so he's been involved in this uproar in the school. School shuts down for a while. One of the teachers got a number of the artists, Orozco was another one, and encouraged them to go down south in Mexico to join one of the Revolutionary Army groups. And that's when Orozco did largely illustrations of things that were going on. It seems that Siqueiros may have fought, but for 5 years, so he's late teens, early 20s, he fought. So he saw all the brutality. And I don't think it's known exactly when he became a communist, but it was very early on. And he, unlike Rivera, who got kicked out of the Communist Party at one point, Rivera's always on the side of Trotsky. He's a Stalinist, a really hardline Mexican communist. And that's one reason he spent so many years in prison. But after one period in prison, he was sent an internal exile to a city where there was a silver mine. And there he met the great Soviet filmmaker, Sergei Eisenstein. Do you know, like Battleship to Potemkin, the really, really revolutionary films. And they discussed visual arts a lot. So he's getting new ideas coming into his head. Mexico doesn't want him, but he got an invitation to come to the United States. So now we get his work in the US in 1930, 1932. First for the owner of the art school that was in this building, Chenard Art School. It's a school for professional artists. What that means is it's not for fine artists. Disney's used a lot of people who got their training in storyboarding and drawing for cartoons, going to Chenard. And
Where was it?
this is in Los Angeles. So he comes up to Los Angeles. He got a visa to come up. And the reason the owner of the school wanted him to come is they wanted the students to learn how to do frescoes. So Siqueiros, fine, I'll teach them. Well, where to find a good space? On the exterior of the building, you can see there's really no expansive exterior wall that would work. I'm going to show you something that no longer exists. But I'm showing you a computer reconstruction of what it was. I'll come back to this in two more, but I'm so sorry that I couldn't get any larger an image than this. What he's teaching the young mural artists in the United States, you can just barely see. He's using a hose. He's spraying the paint on the surface. So he's teaching new ways to paint, as well as new surfaces to paint on, and using new paints, because he's introducing outdoor mural painting. Yes.
This is how muralists paint now.
Absolutely. He's far more important in terms of what's going on now than any that we've looked at. Yeah, he's the granddaddy for it. And the Chicano mural movement in the 70s, here's the one. So this was a scene, and it's a union worker trying to arouse the workers, which evidently would have been an okay image, except if you look at the the listeners on either side, a man and a woman, both holding children. One's black and one's white. And evidently for that provocative, racist fury was so aroused that within a year, this is whitewashed, gone. See, this is the peril of doing murals. This was destroyed within a year because it was too provocative, which of course is like proof of this is why the murals were important, because they reached people. They did teach people. This is not for the ultra-educated going to museums. This is for everyone, and messages that are unmistakable. So, well, that was still very fresh. There was sort of a socially conscious young woman in LA who hired him to do another mural on Olvera Street. And this is I've been through, but never to LA. Has anybody here been to Olvera Street? It's in the Mexican area, and this is supposedly it's now the quaint street that's sort of like a Mexican market street. And that's what it was created to be. It was in the heart of the Mexican area of LA. But she wanted to, it's the same thing that Rockefeller was doing, bring that view of the lovely, nice life among the peasants in Mexico. So, and this photograph showing, this is when it was new, there'd be strolling musicians, and it was much less than 100 years before this that this was still completely Mexican territory. I mean, this wasn't North American, this is Mexico. Sorry that I can't show you a better image of this because it's no longer in this condition, but I want to let you see its location better. It's on the second floor exterior wall, and then the thought was that they were going to have like a beer garden on the lower roof next to it. And it was to be just a really pleasant scene, lush tropical scenery, and just all the evocation of what they want people, like a tourist, come to Mexico, see the beauty of the country. And this is one of Siqueiros's friends in front of it. So you get a better idea of what it looked like originally. But now, this is what it looks like. It was whitewashed shortly after it was done, a few years later, but there were no photographs taken in color at that time. So it's been restored by the Getty Institute of Restoration, one of the premier art restoration programs in the world. And they've spent decades restoring it. But they made the decision that rather than to repaint, because you can't be certain what the color was, they would just reattach flakes of paint that were there and then protect it. I brought this in simply because it reminds me of that image of creating a mural, when you have Rivera and his bum and then two people down below. Now it's recreating, only they're not really recreating it. They're using the same fastidious attention to it as was used in restoring the Last Supper, where there was a decision made, but you do not replace, except for the head of Jesus, which they simply, that's repaint, but they can't possibly take that off. That they will clean every original bit of paint, but any paint that is not original does not go back on the wall. So this is a little bit of what's left. And then it would have been something like this. Now, it was large. You saw from that man standing up there that is well over human size. The woman who commissioned this did not get what she asked for. What you have in the center is a crucified figure, and that's a crucified Indian. And what's on top of his cross? The American eagle. American imperialism is sacrificing the population, the poor population of Mexico. And then that sloping side, that would be sort of like a Mayan pyramid behind. And then the jungle is overgrown. It's a statement of protest against American imperialism. This is the whole thing. So you have this overgrown jungle, this sacrificed figure. And then in the top, now if you're looking at the right, this is the only thing I have a detail from. They got this off even while the rest of it was left on for a while. There are two sharpshooters, and they're aiming at the eagle. Now, what kind of artist is doing this? He truly believes in the value of art to change opinion, to make known outside the Mexico what's going on, and to get people to think about it. Just prior to this, when he was still in Mexico and in that period where there were no more murals going up, he said, oh, fine. Okay, we'll just put them on the pages of our newspapers. Well, look at the images out there. And then this is the only one of, you can see from the centerfold, this is an image taken from a magazine. The only one of the murals that he did in LA, the only mural he did in the US that survives. It's in a garden of someone. So it's sheltered from public view. And it looks so disarmingly simple, but it's like emblematic. It's all packed with meaning. So I'll show you what we have for details of it. The property belonged to a man who was a movie director, a movie maker named Dudley Murphy. He made a film with Paul Robeson in it and Ballet Mécanique. So he was a very avant-garde filmmaker. And Siqueiros stayed with him during his time in LA. And this was his way of repaying him. So it's a patio, and it's a covered patio, three sides, and it was a concrete wall patio. And then Dudley Murphy said, well, at night, Siqueiros would paint this during the night. So he'd have me come in and put plaster over a little section, and then Siqueiros would paint it. And it's called Mexico Today. So take you through the bits. Oh, there's Siqueiros looking himself quite debonair, standing next to it, so you get the idea of the size of it. So here's a composite. So in that top one, well, if you look at the floor in there, you can see those are three combined photographs. It's like three sides of a box. And just go through the imagery in that all, and then we'll take the details of it. Well, which way? Do you want me to have the box opening out toward you or opening this way? Because I'll try to orient it for you. Okay, here's the box. It's facing you this way. You're coming in here. So we're looking at there, what's on the right-hand side. There is, turning in, there's a wall, small wall with just, it looks like a portrait on the wall. And that's a portrait of J.P. Morgan. Then the next wall is these men lying down. Those are thought to represent men who've been slaughtered during the revolution. Then the central section, there's a revolutionary soldier with a sombrero, and then two women and an infant. And then you come around the side, and again, the one that'd be like the JP Morgan over here, there's a Soviet soldier. So then we take you through the bits. So that you get the idea of the size of this. So here's JP Morgan. What's he doing here? This is what I was saying in the beginning. I mean, these people are, there's a lot of hostility to that investment in Mexico and taking over their country by the wealth of the, and one of the chief, so like second in command under JP Morgan, was appointed as the ambassador to Mexico, which is not something Sequeiros approved of. This is a photograph taken by Edward Steichen of Morgan. And can you see that must be the source of this? But he is such a good artist. You see, he absolutely captured that face. And he has the same kind of shirt, but he turns the head. It's not the same angle. So that has to have the visual imagination to see that face as it turns and be able to represent it as it turns.
But why is it there?
Because Sequeiros is suggesting, well, ask me that again when I've shown the rest of them, okay? And then to see how it fits in. And then you have these men, victims. The only, and they're not put in place, they're just on the wall. So it suggests almost like they're numbers, 1, 2, 3, as if you're 10, 20, 30, however many. And this is the mouth of the one up above, which is also eloquent. Very interesting too, when you look at that hand, look at all his forms. That's not articulated like a hand. These are just tubular forms. They're sort of like mechanical forms. But the indignity of looking right up in the nostrils, I mean, this is like, that's a very dead body. So this is the Mexican revolutionary soldier. And I would imagine, as you look at this, well, now I would imagine, what's your view of this person? Any, would you like to invite him over for dinner?
Did they all wear masks?
Well, some of the revolutionary soldiers did. Do you see he's got one tooth? That's probably another portrait of this man, a recently deceased president of Mexico who had been very corrupt. So you had, he's right across from Rockefeller. This is the corruption, the nexus of the corruption right there, between the government and wealth. And these are the victims. The peasantry. Mexico had a very strict caste system, and the indigenous people were the fourth down in this 4-layered caste. So here they are, 2 women and a youngster with the sunken cheeks in that baby of starvation. So that's traditional Mexico. And look how interesting. I'm looking at it as art too. So at the woman who's sort of got her hand under her toes there, look at the way that garment is over her arm. Does that look like cloth? No. I'm trying to think, would that be like, well, I think of a terribly culinary one. It looks to me like a layer of dough, sort of like it's pliable but thick, and then another one and another one, and it's a pattern. So he's playing on so many different levels of meaning and representation.
The child's face looks very adult.
Yes, yes. I'm thinking, oh, why didn't he do one of those great swollen bellies? But well, he doesn't. But anyway. And then the Soviet soldier. So he would be facing toward them too. And evidently, this one, so I don't think I'd follow this, but it's like the uh, parallelism between the Russian Revolution and the Mexican Revolution. That for Siqueiros, for sure, this man represents something good because he is a staunch communist.
What year was this painting?
1932. Well, he wanted to extend his visa. It was denied. So when Siqueiros had to leave, he went to, I think then he went to Uruguay. He has works seeded all over. One period during an exile, did works in Chile, Uruguay, Brazil. But without a visa, he did come back to the US in 1936. And there was this Congress of American artists. Now, America, this is that concept. I mean, America's North America and South America is America. But so he gave a really fiery speech at this Congress and about how art needed to change, this revolutionary, the call for this, like, we can't use traditional means. This is not the society is so thoroughly changed. We're a mechanical world. We have new materials. People are moving. The pace is like, what are we doing this old-fashioned, utterly irrelevant work? And so he started, enough people there were fired up by his ideas that they helped him raise money to rent a sort of studio off Union Square for a year. And there were both American and mainly Mexican artists came. And Jackson Pollock was one of the people there. And I think I wrote down somewhere, but there's 6 principles. We are for experimentation. There is no hierarchy here. We're not producing finished works of art. We're trying to find what is appropriate for our own age. And we work cooperatively. And so that's what they're experimenting with, all these plastics, all these different kinds of paint, auto paint. As I say, he'll use a lot of auto paint. And these you need new tools. We're starting over again. And then, of course, there's no hierarchy. We were all together. You don't have to have any training as an artist. There was a scientist in the group. There was an architect in the group. There's a photographer in there. We're all doing this creating a new world. But I love this lack of there being any hierarchy. And I bet you can tell me which one of those people is Siqueiros, even if you didn't know what he looked like. On the floor. Oh, I'm just a modest man, right? But of course, everybody therefore has to look at him. So, yeah. Yes. And he wrote beautifully. He wrote all the time. Many manifestos and many articles, and yes. So the thought by many people is that that's where Pollock got, although he didn't immediately start working, doing drip painting, that that's where he got his sort of inner permission to do that. Because when they're experimenting, throwing paint on the walls, throwing it here, dripping it here, blobbing it here, it's like anything was to be possible. Well, then immediately after that, Siqueiros went to Spain and he fought in the Spanish Civil War. He was a colonel and he led troops. He very active in the war. And when he came back, that's when he did this, which I read was based on a photograph he'd seen in a 1925 National Geographic of a baby on the back of a mother someplace in Africa. But that image of that crying baby stayed with him. And he transforms and expresses all his feelings about the war and the brutality and the degree of destruction and the filth of that war in this painting.
Change the image.
Oh, really? There. There are comments about one of the strangenesses in this and its power of this painting is that on the one hand, it is so horrifying that you don't want to look and you want to sort of like get away. And on the other hand, it has so many details, you want to get close to see what those details are. So it's psychologically powerful. So this is reprise a little bit and respite from him. The attitude toward the mechanized world. All the artists were recognizing it was here, right? But for Rivera, he had such a sanguine view that this is like man and industry working together and we will create something great. We are creating something great. By this time, he'd been kicked out of the Communist Party. And there are many extremely biting and quite amusing comments in retrospect. People wrote about, the way he sold out to North American money, And then you had Orozco, man overcoming machines. He really saw all the damage that warfare and a mechanized life was producing. This is from the series in Dartmouth. And then this is Siqueiros. Yes, we're going to create an art that's for the machine, made by the machine, with the machine, showing the machine. And I went crazy on this. I so much wanted many illustrations to show you of this. It cannot. I'm also going to become speechless over this because it so takes me out of my comfort zone. Can you tell from this that it's painted on a squared? I mean, it's a standard quarter, like take a stairway here. Right angled walls, flat ceiling. You can see the floor, but you can't really see the angles in the walls very well, can you? He creates an art that says, we are always on the move. It's not art to be looked at as you would in a museum, as you would on your walls, because this is to be outside work for people on the move, moving rapidly to be understood by everybody as they speed past. Now he's doing this with a group, always with a group. Now, I'm gonna have great excursions will go beyond this, but Orozco and Rivera were traditional in the way they painted, not just that they were reviving fresco, but the way they painted an image is as if you stood in front of it and you saw it. They give you an illusion of a space, maybe that you can go into it, like the so-called window on a world. but always from one point of view. And that's what made it really interesting for Michelangelo, because you could see it from below, you could see it from the sides, and he has to figure out, but each one of those parts is as if you were looking straight at it. And in a space like this, because they were in those separate arcades, separate spaces, you stand in front of one, you walk by. I mean, but you can stand in front of one, you can stand in front of the other. That's still that same approach. Now, Roscoe, I didn't mention it last time. I just thought, like, oh, I don't want anybody to be paying any attention to this. Look what he does. He just puts one right next to another, no frame between it, but it's like one scene, one scene, one scene, one scene. No, these are at the in Dartmouth. See, so you have his concept of machinery next to the figures, and there's you just move from one to the next. And that's not going to go anymore. Or take this. You have to, and this is big, right? So are you going to stand in the middle as the photographer did here and you see it? That's the way it's designed. But of course, when you walk through, it changes. It's called it's called, well, it's another kind of perspective, which is it's called anamorphosis. It's always been visible, and some artists like Holbein did a painting that shows a skull on the ground that's distorted because it's something seen from a different angle other than straight on. Now there's a lot of play around with this. This is I presume this was gallery show. So this is, you're looking at this angle, you change angle, and then it looks like this. So you go here, here, or here's another one. Look down the hall. You change your point. Where did the other one go? Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, I lost it. I don't know. This is just this is contemporary, a gallery. Oh yeah. So this is the combined view. You see, this is the same space seen from two different angles. So Siqueiros and this stairwell. I have talked before about paintings on stairwells. Because as you go by, you can't have just a one thing here. I mean, you could you could go stand on one step and then you go up a step and then you look and don't look down, don't look up, just look right in front of you. But he says, no, this is dynamic. It needs to change, be coherent from whichever angle you're looking at. That's why a camera cannot do this, because the camera is static. This is made for a movie camera. And his good friend was Serge Eisenstein, and they'd been talking about the new way of seeing things. But how do they paint this? I wish I had with me the diagram that I can't find anywhere. Because this is a group of students working with him. They walked down each step and said, okay, now I can see this much in my view. And then go another step. Well, I see this much, this different part. So you have to make it something coherent from that point of view, then for the person who moves here, then for the person who moves here. How do you do that? Oh, this is another new thing. He's using a slide projector or an overhead projector so that he has the drawing, his plan, projects it against the wall where it gets distorted according to the shape of the space. Then it's drawn on the wall and then they paint it.
It will be different with digital today.
Yeah. It is all about how bourgeoisie has destroyed. It has infinitely many little interesting details, which I can't show you. This is the only one I have, and it's not even very good. That's sort of this is a member of the bourgeois is the parroting figure there, and he's parroting out whatever society. And then can you see like quick marching little figures down below? This is just pre-war. And that's all operated by machinery underneath. Every little bit leads to some other idea, some other set of images.
Here,
It's in the headquarters of the electricians unit union in Mexico City. Look, there they are, just walking down the hall, right by it.
Can anybody get in to see that?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't checked YouTube. There must be some video available of it. So you're looking up. He dissolves. I mean, fortunately, it would be from this reproduction. I mean, you can see where the corners are, the way that lit up. But they had to figure out how to make something looks like it just goes up. And they said, oh, well, we'll put clouds in the corner and that kind of obscures the corners so that you don't have the sense that that's something flat. But yet again, as you look up. Some years, this one he does in 1945. It's just called Democracy. This is a celebration after World War II.
looks more decorative,
What?
it sounds decorative.
Well, the setting is, yeah. She has a third arm. This destroyed the fascism. And this is called from the age of Porfirio Diaz to the revolution. He's put plywood around, and it's a scene you walk through. And so all of these, they're from, it depends on your vantage point. At one point, it's going to make sense, and then you move along and then it changes. So and only one more. I'm looking at the time. This is he lived till 1970. So that's in Mexico City too. It's just called the Polyforum Siqueiros, and it has an auditorium inside and these enormous fresco panels. He began to combine with ceramics, with sculpture, with wire, all materials.
That's Donna.
I don't know who any of these figures are. And this is what it's like inside. And that's the last image I'm bringing in from murals. Do you have any questions you want to? No, no. Yes. You had a question? No, you just. Yeah.
What's this work survive? It sounds like a lot of us say this work survived than other artists.
No, it's part he yes, well, you know what? Yes, because part of the years he's in prison, and then other years he's union organizing and not painting. But he goes back and forth because they're two, verbal means and social means and visual means for getting his message across. He did turn out lots of paintings. they're sometimes just of a single hand or a little this or a little that, but his major works are always murals because he was dead set on creating art to change society, and that had to be something that everybody could see. Yes.
I just had a comment or two. I thought it was a great presentation. I always loved Mexican murals, even when I was a young man. People here don't quite realize how profound the Mexican Revolution was. It lasted 10 years. It was the biggest peasant revolt in world history up to that time. And they actually won, took the capital, Zapata in the south, and Villa from the north. But they didn't have the leadership to maintain power, and over time, the Mexican rulers reestablished themselves, not the same way. It totally transformed Mexico permanently, but different people. That's where Cardenas and other people come. And it all reflected in the art of Mexico. This also shows the relationship between world events, other world events. The victor of the Russian Revolution had a giant artistic expression. That is, the revolution was destroyed by Stalin, the defeat of the revolution. It had the opposite effect on art. And
yeah, its initial revolutionary, I was also very mechanistic, and but just wiped out.
Say Siqueiros means Stalin
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a communist in the sense of fighting for workers' rights anymore. He was a Stalinist who carried out the policy of Moscow. He tried to assassinate.
Yeah, I just sort of forgot to mention that.
He was the founder of the Red Army who got political asylum in Mexico because of the Cardenas administration. It's still the embers of the Mexican Revolution. And had, so it affected art. Rivera was on the opposite side of this political spectrum from Siqueiros.
Yeah.
Rivera worked with Trotsky and Frida Kahlo. Those was a different thing. But over time, that changed with Trotsky's assassination. They felt, other things happened inside Mexico. So it wasn't until probably the Cuban revolutions that art in Latin America had another positive explosion forward. And but it's funny, as a young man, I walked in the University of Houston and I was 16 years old. It was in the early 70s, and we got to see this huge, my first encounter with a mural. The Mexican American Chicano student movement has painted this mural in the student center at University of Houston. And at that time, there was quite a bit of national sentiment inside Texas. The Raza Unida Party had kind of a mass party to some degree. And actually, like 30% of the vote for governor of the state of Texas. The Democratic Party was in shambles, but the Democratic Party retained power. But it was a big thing at the time. But that muralist movement that was the first time I ever seen a mural. That's what attracted me ever since. So I take a lot of pictures of murals for my own thing. But I just think it's interesting how world politics, all these things intertwine. Guernica, the Picasso did, he was same time, other people like Orwell wrote homage to Catalonia, from literature. All these things are interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, you and I should give lecture side by side. No, people would really get a good grounding on something. They would. It would be great. Yeah.
I want to go to something a little more mundane. If you go around, let's say, New York City and other metropolitan areas, you can see murals on so many buildings. You go to Montclair, and there are murals all over the place. And I'm saying, I don't know if these fellows that you're talking about knew what was going to happen, because and it's funny, the people who make the murals, I think, are from a different class from the way that these guys were making murals for. And it's really exploded, and it's in its own way, in a different venue. So I'll think of anytime I see murals around Montclair, I'll just look at.
You say, thank you, guys, thank you. Yeah, because they did it. Yeah, it was really just, it's like turning what had been a closed art wheel just inside out, right? Out to the world to see. Yeah. There's another hand. What? No, yes.
And he could do it all by himself, or he has people helping him.
Oh, no, he believed art should be a collective enterprise. He always had people working with him, except when he was doing that patio for the movie maker in LA.
So how long did something like this take?
Some of them would be only in a couple of months, and then some were like years. Depends when he's available.
His romantic life was a lot quieter than Rivera, his personal life.
Yeah, only 2 women. Okay, no more?
It was, the work in Rockefeller Center, it's totally gone. Rivera did a big thing in the center of Rockefeller Center, and
Yeah.
Rockefeller decided they didn't like it.
Yeah, and wrote a wonderfully diplomatic letter to by him, but just couldn't get him to get that Lenin out of there. All right, see you sometime.